All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Pardon the delay. I sincerely apologize for the delay. But I'll experience a little technical difficulties. Make sure that actually on live and those that are in can actually hear me. So we're gonna see what we got. Greetings, Feather Dragon. Waiting on the rest of the crew to get in. So everyone just a little bit late. We're gonna deal with this. Pick a what? Pick a who? We'll have a discussion about these Pequot wars because it's still going on that everybody's thinking that all these millions of Africans got sent over here, and that's not the case. It's definitely not the case. So very shortly when they get in, we're gonna go in the paint for a little bit. Not gonna take up too much of your time on this Sunday afternoon, because really just want to see some things, hear some things with some folk, because man, I just keep seeing it all over the place. All right. So now we are in. Hopefully I didn't get kicked out of here. Hold on. Hopefully we didn't get kicked out. All right. We are still live. Get myself back in here. Greetings, Sister Pamela. Let's see what's going on. All right. Let me get back in here. Hold on one moment. Get back in here. Make this right. Right. Now, sir, for some reason, it keeps kicking me out of my own chat. Yeah, Real Union, where are you? All right, let me get rid of some of this feedback and static here. Let's see what we got. All right, now we're gonna get it. What do you mean you here? I sent you the link. Gabrielle Union, check the link. Check the box. No, 90 people don't have all day since Gabrielle Union. Let's go. Still waiting on a few more. Once they come on, we're gonna be ready to go. All right. What? Finally getting in here.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. 10-4, little
All
buddy.
right.
Been a long time.
Yes, it has been. So, Lee,
You didn't even check your other messages, did you? Nope, I know you didn't.
I'm checking them now. I think I did. I thought I did. Yes.
All right. What's brother no sellout over there cooking cabbage and stuff? Yes. Oh man. I missed y'all. I know y'all didn't miss me, but I miss y'all. But that's okay anyway. I
Oh
still love
no.
y'all.
Oh no. We miss you too. We definitely miss you too.
Trying to put our heads to bed. I know brother no sellout better not be over there cooking up a batch of moonshine. Yeah. I'm waiting for my one hater to put that thumbs down on the videos, and then we're gonna go ahead and get started because that way I know he's listening when he does his thumbs down. Once I get that, we good to go. But no, I'm not gonna hold y'all too long. This is Gabriel Union. I'm gonna put some stuff in back chat. I'm not gonna make you read. I'm just gonna put it back here to follow along. I'm not gonna
Okay.
do you dirty today. Let's see what we got here.
Well, I definitely pull it up. And you need me to read, I'll read.
Yeah, if they say I was working you too hard before, so I don't want to run you off.
Oh no, it is absolutely came in on time. It is tied to nah, you wasn't working me too hard. It helped me to understand and realize some things going way, way back at the time.
Yeah, we about to take care of some business, and then I'm gonna get on my horse and ride off into the sunset. All right, that's that first one. We're gonna go ahead and
Okay, I got it.
we're gonna jump in the paint here, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. And we're gonna talk about these Pequots. For those who don't may not know about the Pequot, this is really brother Copper Indio's field of expertise, and I wish he was on here. I know he has another engagement. He'll be in a little bit shortly, but hopefully everybody out there can see my screen. If not, I can make it bigger. I think we should be good. Not, let me do it like this. I'll do it this way again. Let's see. See if we can make this better. See if we can work this out here. So I don't want anyone not to be able to see. Let me check out the chat right quick. Oh, he was up. He was there earlier. Uh,
Oh yeah.
all right. Yeah, like I said, we're gonna try to get this going here. I know Brother Kerry Bay probably over there with the marching band or something. Just Gabrielle, you get that link that I sent. You see that?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
All right. Can you do me a favor? She said you want
Uh-huh.
to read. Can you just
Okay.
open us up and read those first two paragraphs for me, please?
Yep. The history of the Pequot War. Prelude to the war. Before the Pequot War, 1636 to 1637, Pequot territory was approximately 250 square miles in southeastern Connecticut. Today, this area includes the towns of Groton, Ledyard, Stonington, North Stonington, and Griswold. The and Thames and Pawcatuck rivers, I'm saying that, okay, formed the western and eastern boundaries. Long Island Sound, the southern boundary, and Preston and Griswold, southern part, the northern boundary. Some historic sources suggest that Pequot territory extend 4 to 5 miles east of the Pawcatuck River and to an area called Weekapaw in Charlestown, Rhode Island, prior to the Pequot War. Within this territory during the early 17th century, lived some 8,000 Pequot men, women, and children, 4,000 after the smallpox epidemic of 1633 to 1634, residing in 15 to 20 villages of between 550 to 400 people before the war. These villages were located along the, what is that, estuaries of the Thames, Mystic, and Pawcatuck rivers, and along Long Island Sound.
Yeah. Thank you for reading that. I apologize. I was
Yeah.
trying to
I
check.
haven't read out loud in a minute.
was was still good. The reason being because they talk about. Let me scroll back. Let me go back. They're always quick to tell you that it was a small group of people, and then all these people were taken out. Majority taken out with smallpox, and we already dispelled that myth because the Arawak had the cure for smallpox because they were treating these Europeans with smallpox when they were over here. So how are these Indians dying of smallpox and you only got a couple of dozen left? And they saying the village of between 50 to 400 people before the war. Here's where the problem comes in. That they're sitting here saying within this territory in the early 17th century, there lived some 8,000 Pequot men, women, and children. So, how is it that you go from that amount to the small amount? They talk about what happened after smallpox because they said smallpox turn around and cut them in half. So, let's talk about what this actual smallpox was and what happened. No, I'm not gonna do that yet. I can't do that yet. I can't do that yet. We gotta slow it down. We gotta be like Roy Rogers and slow down. We gotta slow it down. But we gotta get back out there. Oh man, here we go. Goodbye to that dude. I told you I was waiting on the one thumbs down. He didn't put a thumbs down in there yet, but he's here in chat back to his regular old stuff. So bye bye, Miss American Pie. See you later, dude. Ain't that type of party, not anymore. So when you purchase a can of Act Right, then you can come back in. Till that, you can't. All right. So they always hit you with smallpox. All these Indians always have smallpox. But if you recall, maybe was a year and a half, 2 years ago, we already discussed that the Arawak all up and down the Ohio Valley already had the cure for smallpox and was sharing it amongst the other tribes in North and South America as well as the Caribbean. So where are
Right.
these people disappearing to? We're gonna find out, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls that'll be listening later on, and the other dude that needs some special help. So, just Gabrielle, you still there? I'm tired of going on. Can you read
I'm still here.
the second section for me, please? Where it says a volatile situation.
Yes. The Pequot, the volatile situation. The Pequot War is best understood through examining the broader cultural, political, and economic changes that occurred following the arrival of the Dutch in 1611 and English in the early 1630s. To control the fur and wampum trade during the 1620s, the Pequot attempted to subjugate other tribes throughout Connecticut and the islands offshore. By 1635, the Pequot had extended their control through a tributary confederacy of dozens of tribes, created through coercion, warfare, diplomacy, and intermarriage. For a time, the Dutch and Pequot controlled all trade in the region, which resulted in short term stability through potentially volatile situations, as many native tribes were resentful of their tributary status to the Pequot. The arrival of English traders and settlers in Connecticut River Valley in the early 1630s shifted the balance. The arrival of the English in the Connecticut River Valley resulted in intense competition and conflict for control of trade, and tribes wrested themselves from Pequot subjugation, resulting in the outbreak of the Pequot War.
All right. Can you go ahead and continue to read causes of the Pequot War?
All right. The primary cause of the Pequot War was the struggle to control trade. English efforts were to break the Dutch Pequot control of the fur and wampum trade, while the Pequot attempted to maintain their political and economic dominance in the region. Particular events which have often been cited as the cause for the Pequot War are the murders of the English traders. However, these deaths were the culmination of decades of conflict between native tribes in the region, further amplified by the arrival of the Dutch and English. Can we keep going?
Yes, keep going.
All right. Trader John Stone and his crew in the Connecticut River were murdered by the Pequot in the summer of 1634. Although the Pequot provided several explanations for Stone's death, all of which suggested they viewed their actions as justified. The English felt that they could not afford to let any English deaths at the hands of natives go unpunished. As tensions grew between all parties, the murder of Trader John, which is interesting, Trader Joe's, okay, the murder of Trader John Oldham by the Manassas in Manassas Indians of Block Island in July 1636 resulted in a military response by the English of Massachusetts Bay that led directly to the Pequot War, the first battlefield site defined as battlefields of the Pequot War.
Now, we're getting all into the English and the issues that they were having. Now, I want those that may not be aware to keep in mind that what we know as the 13 colonies did not go past the mountain range of Appalachia. It did not go past the Appalachian Mountains. So all of this is happening squeezed in just along the coastal line. Mind you, they're nowhere near going into the Ohio Valley. They're nowhere near going into what we know as even Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, any of the Midwest. None of this. All of this is happening here in this Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, all in this area here is what's going on. So this is not that big of a territory that we have. So bear in mind that all of this is going on around what year is Sister Gabrielle Union? What year is this going on?
Wait, what happened?
What's going on around this? What years is this going on? This taking place?
This is 1630.
Okay, so we're dealing with the 1630s here. I want y'all to keep this in mind. Please bear this in mind. This is around this 1630s. It's the early.
I got a question.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I got a question. So
yes, ma'am.
This is saying 1630. But in our actuality, I'm seeing 1620s, 1630s. But what's going through my mind is that it's not 1630s. It's actually 1530.
Keep going. You're gonna get there. We're going somewhere with this.
Well, I'm saying this because of the time that they added to the calendar, how they changed the calendar. So the time that they added the date or should I say, that they added to the calendar. It actually, going back on records, when they're talking about, okay, this happened in the 1700s, it'll have two dates next to it. So it'll give you an understanding that, okay, it's saying 1700s, but it actually happened in 1600s. It's saying it happened in the 1600s, but it actually happened in the 1500s. Because these wars were all happening at the same time.
There you go. That's what we're gonna get to. That's where all this is gonna lead up to, because you have to start asking yourself, how is it that you have all these wars going on, but you're still able to kidnap millions of Africans? Again, still waiting on that song of lamentation. Somebody give me one, just one song of lamentation. So I'm waiting on that. And you conquering all these people. So you just invincible. If you were able to do that, you able to, they all fighting each other. They all got this triangular slave trade going on. All this stuff is going on. They be able to cross the water. They able to get somebody to chop down all these forests, wherever these forests are in Europe, I don't know, and building all these ships like this, right? By the hundreds or by the thousands. That's the only way you're going to ship 30 million people over to the Americas. And when I say the Americas, I'm saying in total, I'm talking about North, South, and the Caribbean. Because we only know that they, by their quote unquote records, that there were a few 100,000 that came to North America. But you're going to find out here shortly that even those few 100,000 were not Africans. All they were doing was taking those from the Caribbean and shipping them into South America. Those from South America, take them to the Caribbean, and then bringing them to what we know as North America, and creating those seasoning factories that they were having in the Caribbean. But you're going to find out a lot of these were us. Because again, as I say, as there is a mass exodus with a group of people from a particular land, there has to be a mad influx of the same group of people into another land. But they're going to keep telling you smallpox, smallpox, smallpox. It's killing all these people, smallpox. Let's go ahead and talk about the Endicott's raid on Manassas villages of Block Island, Rhode Island. Can you go ahead and read that part again for me?
Yes. Can I also add to what you just said? I mean, okay, so this says 1630s, right? So nobody learned anything from 1519, 1524, 1526, 1527. Nobody, no tribe, no chief, no one learned anything and let it happen all over again 100 years later.
That is a question. You know what? We go touch into that, but I have to. We have to take baby steps, Sister Gabrielle Union, because I was told before that we make people's heads explode. So we don't want anybody's head to explode. We don't want anybody to run off. So, but you on to something. We all on the same page, because no one remembers any of this. No one has any recollection. Everybody's memory is just forgotten, and no one knows what's going on. But we're gonna get into that. Since Gabrielle, you go ahead and read this one section here on Endicott's raid on Manassas villages in Block Island, Rhode Island.
Okay. In late August 1636, Massachusetts Bay organized a force of 90 soldiers under the command of Colonel John Endicott. This group launched a punitive expedition against the Manassas of Block Island in retaliation for the murder of Trader John Oldham just a month earlier. The force sailed from Boston on August 24th, 1636, bound for Block Island with instructions to kill all of the men and take away the women and children. After a briefly contested amphibious landing along the east beaches of the island, the first recorded amphibious assault in the New World. The expedition established a base camp, what is now Crescent Beach. Base camp was near their point of landing and a short distance from their anchored ship. The English spent 2 days searching for the island. The English spent 2 days searching the island for the Manasseh, who fled into the swamps for safety. While a few Manasseh warriors skirmished with the English, no significant action took place. The English burned 5 or 6 villages and destroyed several cornfields. Before proceeding to the Pequot Thames River with instructions to take by force if necessary, the murderers of John Stone and his crew, Endicott forces sailed to Saybrook Fork and discussed actions with Lieutenant Lyon, Gardner, and others. Several of Endicott and Garnier's men together sailed to Pequot country and disassembled on the east side of the Pequot Thames River at the site of a major Pequot village, possibly the present site of the United States Naval Submarine Base. Negotiations were unsuccessful and the English landed and burned the village. One of the native guides, interpreters who accompanied the English, killed a Pequot and thus began the war between the Indians and, that's lowercase, is that us or US? That's us, right? And us,
Yes.
English, in these parts. Okay. Garnier, 1901, 11. The Pequot viewed this action as an unprovoked attack and immediately began military operations against the English outposts at Saybrook Fork at the mouth of the Connecticut River.
Now, let me give a little bit of backdrop. Before all of this was taking place with the Pequot Wars, this same Pequot had already had wars with the Dutch. And the Dutch and the Pequots had already come to some understanding. This is where you start to see a shift from what we know as the 13 colonies, or became known as the 13 colonies. It was a shift from being called New Amsterdam to New England, because the conflict is coming in between these Dutch and these English. And you're going to keep seeing the conflict between these Dutch and these English. And recall that these Dutch are the same folks as the Germans. That's why when you go over to Germany, their currency is called the Deutschmark, the Dutch. These are all the same folk. Don't let the smooth taste fool you. They can change their names all they want to. We still dealing with the same folk. So now we understand before what was, and you're going to start to realize why later on the British not only shipped the American Indians out, but you're going to realize that they shipped these Dutch out. Then you're going to see a lot of Dutch, aka German colonies that start popping along the Gulf Coast region. And that's not just the Gulf Coast region of what we know as the southern states of the United States, but also when we get into what they call Mesoamerica and into the Caribbean, because they start kicking these Dutch out along with the American Indian. But I don't want to go too far into the battles anymore. It's just the Gabrielle Union. But I want people to really see this here, because we're gonna go on to another section. I'm gonna put that, I'll put that link, I'll put all that stuff when we're all done. I'll put it in the section in the chat after the live stream. But I want us to see another section here. This is out of Encyclopedia Britannica. And Sister Gabrielle Union, I'm gonna drop that link because I don't want you straining your eyes. I appreciate you helping me out. Like I said, waiting on Brother Copper Indio to get up in this camp when he's done with his previous engagement. Hope I didn't make anyone too dizzy by doing all that. What I just did, real good. Because all I want to know is how all of this stuff is going on, and no one remembers anything. Like you said, no one remembers any of these battles. Everyone just having amnesia, and all of a sudden, we just got done. So I'll put this other link in the chat. Before we go on to, I want to check the YouTube chat, because I want to make sure if anyone will have any questions or comments or anything like to put out there, because I definitely do not want to give me hand out some stuff here. All right. Let me find Sister Pamela Hall pass again. Yes, just in case that Suck MC tries to come back in here. Sister Pamela Hall pass, you still there? Okay. All right. Ha! Yes, did. I speak a little German. Yeah, I speak Deutsch a little bit. I actually spent 2 years in Germany, so I had to learn how to speak a little German. And they'll tell you the same thing. They'll tell you all this myth about all these kidnapped Africans being brought over here is a lie from the pits of HE hockey sticks. They know the truth. Now, are we willing to receive this truth? I'm talking like a robot. Oh no. I don't know why I'm sounding like a robot. Sister Gabrielle Union, I sound like a robot now.
No.
You probably got all the windows open up. That's probably what's causing it. Pamela Hall pass. Sister Gabrielle Union got all these windows open and probably lagging my live stream here.
Okay, let me close the room. I'm sitting on 48 windows, so yeah, you might be right.
All right, I had to put some hats on some people in the room. So you see that Suck MC or Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch and all of his crew trying to come back in here, just zap them out. So all right. Do you see that link where I had in there, the Pequot War? Can you read that for me if you got it up in one of your 28 million thousand windows, Sister Gabrielle Union?
Yes, I got it up. Pequot War. Okay, war fought in 1636 through 1637 by the Pequot people against a coalition of English settlers from the Massachusetts Bay, Connecticut, and Saybrook colonies, and their Native American allies, including Narragansett and Mohegan, that eliminated the Pequot as an impediment to English colonization of southern New England. It was an especially brutal war and the first sustained conflict between Native Americans and Europeans in northeastern North America.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I got another question.
Go right ahead.
So, as I understand it now, North America consisted of Iceland, Greenland.
Correct.
So it's very interesting that when they're talking about North America, it's mentioned in the areas that we now call the United States.
Mm-hmm. They never talk about those American Indians that were living in the Nordic region that you mentioned, that Iceland and Greenland, that the Vikings first encountered. And you'll see, as we talked about before, those long houses, the same long houses they found in the lands of the Vikings, was the same style of long houses they found over here in that Nordic region of Greenland, Iceland, and down in what we know as what we commonly know as North America today. But the only difference is that those Viking long houses, they forgot to put the chimney stack to get the smoke out of there, and they were smoking themselves over there like beef jerky. So when you start asking these questions and they start realizing is the area that we call the Nordic region that was so cold at what we thought of being just ice, a block of ice, was not a block of ice. It wasn't always that way. There's been shifts, just like there's been a shift in the Mississippi River. But that's another subject for another time. Sister Gabrielle Union, we're going to have just a breakout session with just advanced classes in the Zoom. That's what we've got to start doing.
Oh, yeah, because I was about to say, I actually found out the island that's in their archival records that they used and talked about how they had to sail to that island because that island was the closest to Greenland to trade.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, keep going.
I just remembered that, thought about it like, oh, they talked about trade pre-colonial. This is long before all these wars and everything was taking place. They were already trading.
Had been trading for thousands of years. So you get back and you read about the Vikings that ended up all the way coming down into almost South America, and they didn't want to act right. And at Chichen Itza, they bound them up and put them back on their ships and sent them back to the Nordic region. Of course, there's a remnant that stayed there, and you'll see pockets there, and they talk about those pale faces or white men in English terminology that was still there in the land, and that they didn't bother anybody, and all they were just, they took care of their cattle, and they were ranchers, and they stayed to themselves. But they had been there, but they weren't the original people that were there. They came here, came to the Americas of what we know as North, Central, and South America. But they never discussed those Vikings. If you notice, they never talk about the Vikings having been over here, and they never talk about the Turks having been over here and traded. They don't talk about these things, but that you see the signs with the Vikings, with the long houses. You see the signs with the Turks, with the tobacco. These are things that originate over here. But all of a sudden, everything started with Christopher Columbus, and just worked from there. When that couldn't be the case. But we also know they were trading with some West Africans, but that's another subject for another time. But these West Africans, again, gonna tell you, everybody talking about Ghana and Mandy and all these Nigerians and all this. Oh, everybody's Nigerian. No, they came from over here and settled over there. But again, I don't want to go back too far. But Sister Gabrielle Union, can you do me a favor? Can you continue to read underneath that picture where it says the best understanding the Pequot War? To best understand the Pequot War, that section right there.
Yes. Okay. To best understand the Pequot War, one needs to consider the economic, political, and cultural changes brought about by the arrival of the Dutch on Long Island in the Connecticut River Valley at the beginning of the 17th century, and of English traders and settlers in the early 1630s. The world into which they entered was dominated by the Pequot, who had subjugated dozens of other tribes throughout the area during the 1620s and early 1630s, in an attempt to control the region's fur and wampum trade through the use of diplomacy, coercion, intermarriage, and warfare. By 1635, the Pequot had exerted their economic and political and military control over the whole modern-day Connecticut and eastern Long Island, and in the process established a confederacy of dozens of tribes in the region. The struggle for control of the fur and wampum trades in the Connecticut River Valley was at the root of the Pequot War. Before the arrival of the English in the early 1630s, the Dutch and Pequot controlled all the region's trade, but the situation was precarious because of the resentment held by the subservient Native American tribes for the Pequot overlord. When the English entered upon the scene, those other tribes sought alliance with them, shifting the balance of regional power and bringing about conflict as the competition for control of trade heated up anew. Although the immediate impetus, impetus for the war is often identified as the killing of English traders, those deaths were the culmination of decades long conflict between Indian peoples that was exacerbated by the presence of the Dutch and the English. Among the Seminoles.
Exacerbated by who? The presence of who?
By the presence of the Dutch and the English.
Oh. Mm. So now in the next paragraph on the ad, it goes on and it talks about the murder of the trader John Stone. And what took place after that. But I'm gonna skip down a little bit for the sake of time, because we already talked about John Stone. It says in late August, I'm kind of midway through that paragraph. It said in late August, the Massachusetts Bay Colony sent a force of about 90 soldiers under the command of Colonel John Endicott to Block Island in Pequot Territory in the southeastern Connecticut in order to exact retribution for the traders' deaths. They wanted to get revenge for John Stone's death. But let's keep going, because I want to go a little bit, because like I said, I want to speed this up a little bit. And I'm gonna give you a little breather on your reading. Sister Gabrielle Union.
I'm there.
Now, can you go down? It's another picture which says Pequot War, it says Manassas, and they skirmishing when they kind of there in the water. Can you read that paragraph that's underneath that, please?
Yes. Manassas Indians skirmishing with English colonial troops led by Colonel John Endicott as they approached Block Island in 1636 during the Pequot War. Hand-colored woodcut.
Now, can you go?
Oh, this is in the North Wind Picture Archive.
Well, I think we got. Think we got the grudge up in this camp.
Oh.
Brother Copper, anything up in this camp?
Copper.
Hey.
You good, Brother Copper?
All right. Appreciate it. Sorry for being late.
No, you good. We were just treading water till you got it. Sister Gabrielle Union was cutting up again, letting all them windows up, letting all them flies in. Yeah, man. It's been a minute, been a long time.
It has. Good to have you back.
So it's good to be back. Got some renewed energy. Stay away from them player haters and weirdos.
All right.
Brother Copper, we're delving into your field of expertise, these Pequot wars, and we were just discussing on how before the British, the Dutch, and the Pequots had already had their battles and wars going on and had come to some mutual understanding. And then here comes this next group of the British, and we were mentioning how it has shifted from, at this time, New Amsterdam being under the Dutch to what we began to know as New England.
Right.
And how the battle had taken place, and they wanted to get revenge because of Trader Stone's murder, when the Pequot had killed him for the things that they were doing. And so we were just going along there, just a quick, recap and we were talking about the things that had taken place in the early to mid 1630s, and we're going to get
Okay.
to where they've been discussing about half of these tribes and half of these Indians, and most of the Indians, American Indians, were taken out due to smallpox. So, Brother Copper, I'm gonna let you jump in here and add your thoughts to this before Sister Gabrielle Unit continues to read. And again, I appreciate you jumping on, especially on a Sunday afternoon. You can be doing anything else, but you decided to spend a little time with me. So, Brother Copper, you have the floor, sir.
Likewise, thank you. What's interesting that we see as we learn more about the situation with the Pequots and the dynamic between the Dutch and the English, especially, is these wars are on one side wars against tribes to get more land, because more and more land's been promised back in Europe by the crown to all of these corporations, to all of these people, that if you can just get out of here and go to that land, you can have land of your own. You know, that was on one hand a prison sentence, because remember, in the 1600s, while this was going on, they didn't find Australia, so that penal colony didn't exist at that point. Well, that land didn't exist as a penal colony, I'd say. So on one hand, you had a prison sentence. On the other hand, you had the opportunity for a brand new life if you were born in poverty and destitution and so forth. So that's part of where the desperation that you see in these invaders when they come here. So they're desperate for land. They've been promised land, and they're trying to make good on. So that's one dynamic of it. The other dynamic is the wars that are already still going on in Europe, because remember, it wasn't just the Crusades against the non-Christians and non-Europeans from that group of battles, but also battles between civilizations within Europe that were spilling over now into other lands. And it's important to keep context with that, because that's part of what drives some of the politics that's associated with these kinds of wars as well, where you're and not just in this area, but a little bit further inland, you're getting French interests coming under fire from the British, who are now expanding into their territory and things like that. So this is a pivotal moment. This, along with some of the things going on with some of the Iroquoian tribes in the mid-Atlantic, like in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and what you later find in another conversation with the Creeks and the Seminoles. So this is a big part of how America, as we know it, was created. I mean, we go back to Crispus Attucks, and I'm sure that's probably going to come up in this point, well, in this conversation at some point. But we look at characters in the story at that point, and I say characters because we were given a different idea. To your point, Brother James, we were given a different idea of what was going on and what was actually happening. And so certain people that were in part of actual history now become characters that play in a narrative that we've been given in school.
Keep going, sir. You good.
Okay. But this is the point where we separate those characters from the actual people in actual history. And you're going to find that a lot of these Pequots end up in places that you would never associate with these people. And I'm just trying to get caught up as I'm talking. You're trying to get caught up to where we are in the text here.
Yes, sir. You got right on point. We're about. Let's see. There's a picture where it says underneath the caption, it says Pequot War, and they're painting of the Pequots that are actually on the waters, shooting their arrows at the British. And so we're right there on the paragraph that's underneath that section there with that caption, and that says the war lasted 11 months. That's what Sister Gabrielle Union is going to pick up on.
Gotcha. Also, Brother James, if you can go back up a little bit to the image that was there. Look at the dress and regalia of the Pequots that's depicted here.
Yes, sir.
Later on, when you get to the point where you're talking, and this is just for reference, just to give you some context as to what we're seeing. This is what a lot of the colonists are trying to mimic when they end up seeing the things going on in Boston during the Tea Party, when you have colonists dressed up like supposedly like Indians, because that was a statement. That wasn't just, oh, we're going to act like we're these other people that we're sabotaging, these boatloads of tea that we're dumping in the water. That was also symbolism. That was the colonists pretending to be the Indian and assuming the Indian's identity, where they paint their face with soot, essentially what you would call blackface today, and put on what they would approximate as Indian regalia, not really knowing much about what the tribes were wearing. And I did hear wampum when I was listening right before I jumped on. Wampum was a big deal. That was currency.
Yes, sir.
And they one of the things that you end up seeing with the invaders, because this is a cultural staple of the invader, is to come into a new society, either through peace or through war, mimic what the indigenous people are doing, and then assume and take over the thing that they perfected in mimicry, or at least they think they perfected in mimicry, and then take credit for it. So I went to a powwow recently with the Cherokees Nottoway Indian tribe in Virginia, and I had the pleasure of listening to Chief Red Hawk speak about the tribe and the tribe's history, and he mentioned how wampum was currency. It was so valuable among the tribes, Iroquois and Algonquin tribes, and it was traded as currency. But the invaders came and began to use their tools to be able to manufacture wampum at such a rate, it started to inflate it as a currency, where it became unusable. So that is part of how they got them using their currency. That may actually give you guys some context as for what's going on today with our currency, but I digress. But that,
no,
but all of
you're good. You're on it, and that's what we wanted to discuss. Is saying when they started the flip and switch on what started happening, because that was currency and it was crafted by hand with so many, and the details that went into it was the value of it. And so now, having to switch over to the way these Europeans are doing it, you become dependent upon them for any type of exchange or trade, because now that's the currency that they've taken over. Go ahead, Brother Copper. You going in. Go ahead.
Exactly. This is where a passive form of slavery eventually leads into the chattel that we hear about later. And some of this is gonna make sense when we talk about the fallout and aftermath of the Pequot War. What happens to these people when they become prisoners? This is you're seeing the passive form of enslaving people, getting them dependent, because slavery is dependency upon people and having to work because of that dependence on those people. And so you're starting to see them come in. They invade, and it's peaceful for a while, but things get out of hand, and they use every tool that they have to make the indigenous people, more dependent on them as they wage their wars against not just the Indians, but also other invaders. And once everything falls out, same thing happened in the Tuscarora War down in North Carolina in 1711. They play people against each other, and once there's fallout, once there are prisoners taken, those people get shipped out, and we're going to see that later on in this conversation.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you, Brother Copper.
Thank you for that.
Putting some perspective on this. I definitely thank you for that, sir. So I want to go back to we definitely gonna come back to you, Brother Copper. So I know you just getting warmed up. So this is you.
All right.
Sister Gabrielle, you still there?
I'm here.
Okay. Can you go ahead and read where it says the war that lasted 11 months?
Yeah. Yes. All right. The war lasted 11 months and involved thousands of combatants who fought several battles over an area encompassing thousands of square miles. In the first 6 months of war, the Pequot, with no firearms, won every engagement against the English. Both sides showed a high degree of sophistication, planning, and ingenuity in adjusting to conditions and enemy countermeasures. I'm just going to say, in my mind, reading that right now sounded like really contradicting, but I'll keep reading. While the Pequot War was the first time. You said what?
No, I was just saying you on to something. I was just cheering you on. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, while the Pequot War was the first time that the English had confronted Native Americans, battle formations, tactics, and weapons in England, the Pequot had already encountered European battle formations and methods during a brief war they fought with the Dutch in 1634, as a result of which they had adjusted their tactics to battle the English. In fact, on the eve of the war, the Pequot were a highly effective, experienced military force, having honed their combat skills through decades of warfare against their Native American neighbors. Although although the English muskets were superior to Pequot bows in terms of range and penetration, the Pequot were able to use the terrain and their mobility to great advantage and employed a number of stratagems to negate the English advantage in firearms. Indeed, the English suffered dozens of casualties in the early stages of the war before they were able to adapt their old world military experiences in the battlefields of the New World and win decisive engagements. The turning point in the conflict came when the Connecticut colony declared war on the Pequot on May 1st, 1637. So they're saying they weren't in war in 1620s and 1630s. War, all those, they're just battles. The war, they're saying this war didn't come about until May 1st, 1637. Okay. Following a Pequot attack on the English. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, if I could interject real quick. For those that are interested in this kind of thing, I'm a history guy, so history is all historical stuff with warfare has always fascinated me.
We know that this war has been going on. No. I was just saying we know better than that because we know this war is really one continuous war. It never ended.
Right, and that's kind of where I was going with the statement earlier, was that these wars are really just spillovers of other wars that are already happening in other areas, because when you look at the motivation for war, a lot of this stuff comes from things that are outside of what's right there in the area, or that's overt for people to understand. That's why we're talking about these wars as being something separate. I mean, you could summarize a lot of these wars as the Indian Wars, where they're waging war against our people for land, and they're all connected. Just because one theater of it's happening in North Carolina, and what's now North Carolina, and other theaters in Virginia or Connecticut or New York or Massachusetts, whatever have you, wherever it's happening, it's all happening at the same time in the same place. And they're all connected, even if they don't attribute them as being connected. On the other side of it, our tribes were much more connected than they give us credit. See, they broke our tribes up into language families. But those language families didn't necessarily get along with each other. I mean, there were Tuscarora that didn't get along with Cherokees. There were certain groups of Algonquins that didn't get along at certain periods of time. But because the English, and primarily the English, but when the invaders were trying to figure out people out, they broke us up into language families. And they just assumed because we spoke similar languages or similar dialects of languages that we were automatically the same people, and that we weren't still related in some way to these people that spoke different languages or different dialects. See, there's assumptions being made about all of that. That's why, like I was telling you, the powwow that I went to, they call that tribe Nottoway. But that's not what the people call themselves. They call themselves Cheroenaka. That's their name for themselves, but they got their enemy's name for them. Nottawa, snake, an adder. Right? So we kind of have to look at some of this with that context to kind of parse out, okay, did this war start here? What was the cause for this war? And was it connected to previous battles and skirmishes that were already happening? These are just the main events of an ongoing war. Also, when you look at the logistics of war and how war is prosecuted, note that the British firepower that was now seen as being superior was wholly outdone by the weapons of the indigenous people. Because if anybody has any knowledge about weaponry from this period, in order for you to clean and reload a firearm, whether it be a cannon or a musket or whatever have you, well, more muskets than cannons, but you get what I'm saying. The same idea, the same mechanics go into it. Having to clean it out and load the ammunition and everything. By the time you do that, somebody running at you at full speed with a hatchet is pretty much gonna end you.
Yeah.
These people were getting trounced. They write it as if they came here as conquerors and that they made everybody sick, and all of a sudden they just had all this land that was for the taking. These people were getting trounced, and you're going to see why. You're going to see this gets also to the core of why the tribes are treated the way they are, and the prisoners of war especially are treated the way they are when all of this comes out. When all of this shakes out, and you have the prisoners, and they're under control, you're going to see why they treat them the way they do. Because these people felt pain, serious pain, and they were desperate. So, but go on. I just wanted to make that point just so people have some context as far as what we're really looking at with the timeline here, because this timeline is the posted timeline is very different, and the dynamics of the fight is very different than what we're still being told.
Yes, sir. And I'm glad that you had that personal insight, Brother Copper, because that's what we're all getting into. You know, we've always been talking about these timelines, and when you putting it together and understand that it was just, oh yeah, we're going to send a few ships over here and we're going to conquer everybody in the land. Not accurate. Matter of fact, I have a video that I'll post on this channel probably after this live stream of a couple of centuries later of dealing with the Alamo, because I go down there several times a year, but definitely go and check it out when they do the reenactment, and how long it takes them to reload those muskets. There is no way in the world, and especially as those muskets, they didn't even have accuracy when it came to shooting. So you can shoot in that vicinity and not hit anything. You can shoot in that vicinity and hit up in a tree. So there's no way in the world that they coming over here reloading like that, again, in your own territory, I said this on the other live. My grandmother and mother used to always say, baby, you can go out there on the street, get into a fight, hold your own, and if you lose, that's okay. But don't lose a fight in your own home when you know where everything is. And that was the case here. And you're going to find that all throughout what we call currently the Western Hemisphere. This wasn't just a couple of people and they try to write it up. Oh, it's a couple of slave rebellions or a couple of battles here. And no, 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 no. They were getting their heads handed to them in a handbasket. That we have been brainwashed into thinking that they just came over here and they, they just looked upon us and we were afraid and they conquered us. No, sir, no, ma'am. Not at all. Go ahead, Sister Gabrielle Union. Go ahead, continue. But the copy, I can say you getting started. This is you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Following the Pequot attack on the English settlement at Wethersfield, the first time women and children were killed during the war. Captain John Mason of Windsor was ordered to conduct an offensive war against the Pequot in the retaliation for the Wethersfield raid. The most significant battles of the war then followed, including the Mystic Campaign of May 10th through the 26th in 1637, Battle of Mystic Fort, during which an expeditionary force of 77 Connecticut soldiers and as many as 250 Native American allies attacked and burned the fortified Pequot village at Mystic. Some 400 Pequot, including an estimated 175 women and children, were killed in less than an hour, half of whom burned to death. Those who tried to escape the burning structure were shot by the English or by their Mohegan or Narragansett allies, who formed a secondary outer ring around the fortress and fired on any Pequot who managed to escape through the English line. The English estimated that there were only a dozen survivors, 7 of whom were taken prisoner. Following the Mystic Massacre, the English fought the 10-hour so-called Battle of the English Withdrawal against more than 500 Pequot as they sought to reach the safety of their ships at least 7 miles, 11 kilometers away. The Pequot lost half of their fighting men in those 2 battles, which led directly to the disintegration. Apologies.
Yep.
Disintegration and defeat of the Pequot tribe as it fled its homeland following the massacre. In the following months, the English of Connecticut and Massachusetts Bay pursued the fleeing Pequot communities, executing leaders and fighting men and enslaving women and children. So if I'm understanding this correct, it wasn't really the English that was doing most of the fighting. They didn't have that many people. They didn't have that many English.
Exactly. They couldn't just they didn't say, oh, we're going to send backup and they're there in a couple of hours. That wasn't happening. Because you think about a 3-month voyage, if you're just going with not that many people on the ship, you got a 3-month voyage to go over back to England, Great Britain, and then to come back. So you look at about 6 months. Not happening. Not happening. So you get people that look alike, and as Brother Copper was saying, different dialects of the same people that may have had conflicts before and didn't get along, and you make them promises and you give them things and say, help us take them out, and we'll give you a portion of that land, and they say, okay. That's how they've been fighting. They've been fighting wars as proxy. You'll find that out dealing with the even getting down later on, years later, centuries later, to the Spanish-American War. They were sending American Indians down there into Cuba to fight. Same thing with the war in the Philippines. They were sending American Indians over there to fight. Nothing has changed. They're using us to kill us. And then once the group of us that won, they never keep the promises that they made. So here's where we are.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because this is part of how they built the tool belt that they use to take over and conquer. Because you can go into Europe's history, and this is part of where the core of a lot of what I learned about history is, because that's, it's the easiest thing for us to be taught in school. But if you look back at European history, you can see where a lot of where these people originally came from that they don't like to talk about. They would go and they would invade, and when they invaded, they would start proxy wars, because they couldn't always take out an adversary by force. And this is what you're seeing. You're seeing them in a compromised situation where they don't have enough numbers and enough power to take these people out, essentially hand to hand. So they got to resort to other things. And if they can't beat you, they'll turn your friends and your cousins against you. And like Brother James said, they use us to kill us. They're still doing it. Look at Chicago. Look at parts of New York. Look at parts of California. They're using us to kill us. They're using the same tactics now that they've been using this entire time. And they learned it back home. They just brought it here. They imported that here, these proxy wars. And also, like Brother James said, they never keep their promises. They get us worked up. They get us excited. They get us angry to go after each other. And nobody's as skilled at killing us as us. And once we do it, everything that they promised us ends up becoming null and void. They come up with some excuse. They pretend that that they didn't happen, or that they forgot, or whatever have you. But they always find a way to get themselves out of the contracts that they have us sign into to take each other out. That is the codex. That's the rule that they use. That's basically divide and rule. Divide us up, work us against each other, and then take the spoils of everything that we tear down and make available for them. And you're gonna see how they go, and all of this land these people were on now gets hundreds of acres, if not thousands. And they divide this stuff up slowly and displace the people. And once they're displaced, they'll turn them against another group so that they can have something. Lying about what they intend to do the whole time. And I don't know, I can't remember if there's any treaties that are here where they talk about, because they worded some of those treaties in a strange way to our common English today. But I do know in the Tuscarora War, they were the chief, not Chief Hancock, but it was Chief Blunt that was promised a reward as in reservation land for the capture and the execution of Chief Hancock. And it was told, as long as the sun shines, we're not gonna mess with the land. And guess what they did about 50 years later?
Mm-hmm. For the okie doke. And we still keep falling for it.
Every time, even to the day.
See, everything happens for a reason. I'm glad, Brother Copper, you came in right on time. Sister Gabrielle, you still there? Or you over there cooking up some grits? What you doing?
I'm still here.
Okay, go ahead and read this last paragraph, because then we're going to get to the meat of the matter. And Brother Copper going to take us home here in a minute. I have one more link that I'm going to put in there, and then we're going to take it to the bridge. Go ahead, Sister Gabrielle.
Right.
Okay. The battles of Mystic Fort and the English withdrew were significant victories for the English, and they led to their complete victory over the Pequot 6 weeks later at the swamp fight in Fairfield, Connecticut. The last battle of the war, The English victories were won by carefully planned and executed attacks led by commanders and officers who had decades of experience in the 30 years war and were eventually able to translate that experience to the battlefields of the New World. They were a well trained and experienced corps of combat veterans who can make the necessary tactical adjustments in an unfamiliar terrain against a determined and experienced enemy. In the end, the Pequot War forever changed the political and social landscape of southern New England, and it influenced a colonial and U.S. policies towards Native Americans for centuries. The massacre of the Pequot at Mystic demonstrated to all observers in southern New England and elsewhere the English ability and will to wage total war against their Indian enemies. Okay, I got a question.
Go ahead.
Come on.
So, since the recognition that they're giving is to is the recognition that they're giving is who led this. Their years of experience, they're able to fight. How do you fight in terrain that you're unfamiliar with, that you've never fought in?
You have to have allies assist you that are
Right,
from that land.
right. So when it's saying that, it showed not only it's who they're not giving recognition to or who they're not saying was involved, but also that they're saying that the English ability, it showed that the English ability to will to wage total war against their Indian enemies. Well, I mean, it's also showing that they can get a hold of allies to fight against their own.
Right. Now, from a warfare standpoint, and this is still valid to this day, total war, that term total war carries weight with it.
Okay.
Total war is not just a military fight. That's not just a military assault. We're going to sabotage everything about your way of life that we can possibly. Is what total war means. We're going to hit you in the currency. We're going to hit you. We're in warfare where we can get it done. But total war is usually used by a weaker opponent against a stronger opponent, because stronger opponents usually don't have to wage total war. Total war is we're gonna make you hurt in every way possible. We're gonna take your women. We're gonna keep your society from being able to grow. Now think about what I'm telling you in this context of things we still see today. This will give you modern day examples of what we're seeing here. They're going to cut off the creation and reproduction of your population. They're going to enslave you where they can. They're going to make you codependent on them so they get to tell you how to live. And everything they tell you at that point is basically going to be for your continued codependency on them for survival. Now, one thing you didn't see with the fallout from this total war against these Indians is what happened to the people that got taken as prisoners, because they said they took them into slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some of them, but a lot of them that were able to still fight that were taken prisoner were way too hostile to be kept in that area.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant they had to send them somewhere else where they couldn't get back home, where they couldn't get to their kin, but also where the conditions were much more harsh for them to keep them under control. This is where you end up having them go to places like Jamaica and Barbados.
Right.
This is where you end up having people sent further down the coast and to the Caribbean. So when we look down in those areas, what do the people look like when we see them?
Yep.
What's the culture like? Because a lot of people from the continental North and South America ended up in these same places. So you're seeing mixtures of a bunch of these different cultures in the same place. And they don't look like what they tell you the Native American look like, do they?
Right. No, they don't.
I wanted to point that out because while they got rid of a lot of these people, and notice how the British found these people despicable enough or as worthy an adversary enough to wage total war against them. What did the English, who then become later Americans, name their weapons and their helicopters after? Same people. All these tribes of note that they had to fight against, that they gave them, pardon my language, gave them hell on the battlefield. That's the same name they're invoking in their weapons of war now.
Yeah.
So that total war term, that's very similar to what other, not to get too much into politics, but what other nations right now are waging against the United States. Total war.
Yeah. This is my first time really. I mean, I would have just looked at it as, okay, total war. I mean, it's all out war. But reading into this definition more, I mean, the way it distinguishes between the difference between total war and limited war. Limited war is economic and social. Total war is economic, social, and political. And it says the most deadliest conflicts have been fought on ideological grounds in revolutions and civil and religious wars.
Because it's about principle. It ain't what you did to me, it's the principle.
Yep. I get it.
And you'll start to see these influx of, I'll tell you, every time there's an exodus of a group of people from a land mass, there has to be an influx of those same group of people to another land mass. And that gets what Brother Copper was talking about, how we ended up in the Caribbean, and the British labeled these Pequots as Africans. But none of this African stuff going on they were talking about. The Africans that were coming over here were North Africans, Northwest Africans from Morocco, known as Moors, that were coming over here, getting on these ships to conquer the land because they looked like the blacks of this land. Well, I'll keep going back to Esteban. There's several others that they were coming over here, but these were not Africans, because how can you explain that free Africans were coming over here to establish land, but then you enslaving Africans? And you got millions of Africans, so-called, coming over. Now, mind you, all these wars are still going on because the British will have a conflict with the Dutch. And how are you getting all these ships to go back and forth? I go back to a group of people that have said this before, the Melungeons. You look at the group that's called the Melungeons, and then look at what they're saying about their history. They're telling you they're made up of 3 different ethnic groups. They tell you that they are European, they are free Africans. They tell you that their fathers, the Africans, were never enslaved, and American Indian. So how is this whole group that we know as hillbillies today that settled on the other side? Remember, I told you initially they didn't start going west of what we know as the Appalachian Mountains until after Thomas Jefferson was the president, because he had made a declaration and said, hey, long as those people stay over there on the other side of the mountain range, we're good over here. So everyone thinks that people just came over here, Europeans came over here, and they said, they swept through to the Mississippi, and then they swept through all the way to California. Didn't work that way. There were battles all along the way. Now you have to tie into the wars that were going on with those that were known as the Garifuna in the Caribbean, along what's going on with these wars and what we know as the New England states, the New England territories, the northern colonies, the New Amsterdam. All this has happened simultaneously. You can't do all these wars. Where are you getting all these bodies from to have all these wars, to fight all these battles? And they telling you that these American Indians over here, like Brother Copper India was saying, was giving them HW hockey sticks.
Yep.
Go ahead, Brother Copper. I apologize. I yield the mic.
Oh no, that's of absolute value right there, because that's exactly what I was trying to get at is that's what total war is. That is they sent those people, and this is where if you're looking for a smoking gun, or you're talking to somebody that doesn't buy the idea of the so-called African American, not being the indigenous people here, or being the Indians or whatever have you, that they want to refer to the indigenous people as. There's a difference between the indigenous people and the folks that the Moors that were coming over here from North Africa. Now, we're not talking about Moorish science. We're not talking about people that go to the temple and learn a certain set of rules that the Moorish Science Temple identifies with. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the people who were referred to as in terms of ethnicity as Moors, and their identities have also become obscured, where some of these people who were North Africans or Northwest Africans, some of them ended up being classified as white. Some of them ended up being classified as the same as us. And so you get this amalgamation. And that's part of where English, I think, is the biggest culprit in this whole process of obfuscating our identity. Because English are the same ones that call Hindustan India, and mix the idea up of, well, the people in India are the Indians and the people in America are Native American. This is all play on English. When the Spanish and Portuguese were there, they didn't call them people that. And that was actually about the same time the Pequot War was happening. The British weren't in India then. So who was calling India then? The Hindus call it Bharat, and they still do. I got a visa a couple years ago to go to Hyderabad, and on the visa, it's got Bharat on the government document, the Republic of Bharat. Where did India come from? This is all play done in English. And the way you can point to things like this, you can use them as a smoking gun to show, hey, now you got these people here that were Indians that were documented in India, and they were taken into slavery, and everybody assumed slaves were African Americans, right? This is a smoking gun. This is what they're telling you what they're doing. They're telling you they are taking, because that was the aim since they first got here, was to take the indigenous people and enslave them. And they tell you, oh, well, it became unfeasible to enslave these people, so we went to Africa and got them. You had to go 5,000 miles away to go and in the middle of hurricanes and everything else, the Sargasso Sea that nobody likes to talk about, that you can't get through. The dead zone in the middle of the Atlantic. And brought a bunch of Africans here from not North Africa, not Northwest Africa, but from West Africa, from like Ivory Coast, from Nigeria, what's now Nigeria and Angola and so forth, from Namibia. That's where they're supposed to have gotten these people to bring them to Virginia, New England, Delaware, Maryland. Really? When you break it down like that, how can people really how can they really argue against what you're talking about? It doesn't make logistical sense. But again, they don't like talking about the Indian Wars because the Indian Wars are where they admit what they were doing. They admit.
Well, I got a question.
Go ahead.
I got a question because, and thank you to you both for this, because this has got me thinking about and tying in some other things. Well, in order to defeat someone, you need them. So when they were going, for these Pequot Wars and all these wars, they had to use us against them. But how did they figure out how to even get in to begin with? They had to deal with the allies or deal with the people that our ancestors were trading. So it's got me thinking about the wars that happened, when what's it called? The United Kingdom. How the United Kingdom came about. I'm thinking about the wars and the battles that were established with the people who our ancestors were trading with. And after they had the wars and battles there, then they came here. Would that be correct in thinking like that or tying it like that?
You own it, because you have to go back to the Dutch. And when they came with those wars, you had some that sided, some tribes that sided with the Dutch. Some tribes were saying, we're not having this. So you have another crop of people, the British, that are coming along with the French. Listen, we don't want to leave them out because they were coming along in the Carolina region as well. So you had people that just say, hey, we can't continue to go to war. And you see this in movies all the time. It's usually like they'll go to the second in command, the son of the chief, and he'll say, well, we need to come to some compromise. I'm tired of seeing all the bloodshed. And the father's like, no, this is our land, this is our people. And they get into an inner family struggle, power struggle. This happens all the time. Like I say, it's happening in modern day. You see the people all the time. I even see it for people from the islands that swear up and down that they're not the same people that live here on the mainland. I see it all the time. We're not like y'all. Y'all over there in the whole nine. I'm gonna give you an example. I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna be quiet. And I don't want to get into the eerie stuff, mysticism, any of that. I'm just simply saying, when Jamaicans come to the mainland, what area do they go to? And it's a concentration of them. Anybody?
You're talking about in any state?
I'm saying in anywhere in what we call the mainland. What state, what area do they, it's a concentration of Jamaicans?
Urban area.
Yeah. In New York, especially.
This is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
They are coming back home. They don't, because
yes, they are.
trying to figure out why Jamaicans, they in a tropical region.
You still there?
Region. Why do they go to New York? Why all they're coming back home?
Yep. Yes, they are. And I've noticed too in my family, and And a lot of my friends' families, a lot of folks that are in New York now have relatives about 3 to 5 generations back, North Carolina. Same area in North Carolina too.
Yes,
The
sir.
area, the area that the Tuscarora War was fought. And it's all these people I'm talking about from New York City all the way out to White Plains. They in different parts of New York, but they all got family that's from down south. They going home. And a lot of them come down here too for family reunions and stuff. A lot of them. They know where the home is. Even if they don't know, like in their generation, that's home. The same family always seem to move to the same areas. And a lot of them over the generations don't even know their family anymore because of how our families get split up. But we seem to travel in groups to the same areas.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, go on, Brother Copper.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I got an example for you. I got a cousin married into the family. This brother told me that his mama and her people came from Jamaica. And I was talking to him and his wife, my cousin, a while back about how there was a slave catcher, had the same name as his family does. Had a huge plantation there, right here in southeastern Virginia. Captured Nansemond and Tuscarora Indians and sent them to Jamaica. Same name. They kept the name in the family the whole time. It came right back home. That's how it works. People get sent somewhere. They make it home. They may not know they're home.
But they're coming back.
That's right. That's how the Creator works. He takes his children and brings them home. Now, you can expand that out to a bigger level, and that may start to explain some of the things in ancient history, too, why everybody's trying to get here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right, because you know, and the normal narrative they give you is, well, they want our freedom, they want this and that. No, it's deeper than that. Because we a lot less free than we used to be, and things are a lot more bleak than they have been in the last few decades. But people are still coming. That ain't stopped people from trying to get back here. And it's folks that at one point had renounced this place, but they coming back. Something to think about.
Yes, sir. That's why I stated before that when the vice president, like I say, she didn't go to Mexico anywhere. She went to Guatemala and said, "Don't come here. Don't cross the border." And you saying, "Why? These were all the same people that were part of the same land." And if you think as bad as some of the plantations were in the South, everyone, see, they keep trying to fit this narrative that everyone, you're going to cross all of these slave states to try to get north. When you go into what we know as Mesoamerica and you reunited with your people and had the same freedom. So later on, when we go back, we're going to revisit the Mexican-American War, and they're really going to realize why it was such a big deal. It's because the Mexican government, the Mexican nationals, the Mexica, and all the rest of the what we know as the Maya were down there and saying, "We're not dealing with any slaves. You slave people, you plantation owners, you can't come to this region of what we call Texas, Tejas. You can't come here with that." That's what started the battles, and that's what started the war and getting into the Alamo, and then what later became known as the Mexican-American War. So if you're in, let's just say, for example, you in Gulfport, Mississippi. There's a plantation down that way. You could just take a boat and you end up in the Yucatan, you end up in Cuba, you end up in Jamaica, and all these other places you could go to. Why would you try to go through all of Mississippi, try to get all the way through Tennessee, Kentucky, and keep going to try to make your way to Canada. But that's the narrative that they want to keep trying to tell us, and it's not making sense. Or why would you go on to Florida? Because you knew you were protected by the Seminoles that were there, or those that were misnomer as the Seminoles. Why would you go through the southern part of the state to another part of the state to another with a chance of being captured? There's some things that are just not logical. But Sister Gabrielle Union, I'll put another link in there. But I want to say this because Brother Copper, when you said what you said, I'm gonna give you an example. This is what gets people in trouble, and they're not realizing something. The British was the one that started this narrative and said the Garifuna or the Garinagu, either way, same people, said that they got started, right, because they were a mixture of Arawak, Carib, and Africans, right? That these Nigerians came over here and it was a slave ship that crashed. Right. 2 or 3 slave ships that crashed, but turned everybody what we know as black, or the blacks of this land. Like I said, the Costa Negros, Negros Teteros, the blacks of this thing. So the year that they say that this ship took place was 1635. Now, let's go back to what we're talking about today. What was going on in the early 1600s in the land that's called New Amsterdam that became known as New England? Just Gabrielle, you there? Or you cooking okra over there? What you doing?
You talking? Wars.
What you been reading about all day today?
Pequot Wars.
The Peak who?
The Pequot.
Pick a what? Pick a who? So at the same time, these ships come, these British ships coming. Come on, son. And then all they doing is and then they start changing the writings. You find out the British didn't start calling these people Africans until a century later. They started saying these were Africans a century later. But we just got through reading and knowing without a doubt. You just heard from Brother Copper, who's getting the oral tradition from the Powwow and telling you, hey, they shipping us to the Caribbean. Same people.
That's right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brother Copper.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And their language tells on themselves. See, they obfuscate things and use new terms. That's why you keep hearing these new terms come up, especially now, to change the meaning of things, to change how certain words are used. But if you understand where these words come from, you understand also the timelines. The timelines will also give them away because they as they rewrite history, they forget certain details. That's where you get these plot holes like you do in the movies and stuff. You get a plot hole where you got the Garifuna that are down there in Belize. Okay, that's cool, but what about the Pequot War that was going, like you said, the same time, if not earlier now? So how did these so-called Africans get all the way up there? It doesn't make any sense. It makes absolutely no sense. The same is, there was something that you were talking about in your last live that I started thinking about as you were closing up. The area that we call Eastern and Southeastern Virginia, so like Chesapeake Bay area, used to be an empire at one point when the Portuguese was primarily around here, when they were doing their first explorations in the area, was called Ahakan. Notice how much that sounds like a name from another civilization that never gets attributed to being the same thing. But Ahakan was where the Portuguese and the Spanish had planned to settle, very, very close to an area that we now call Jamestown up on the peninsula. Mm-hmm. Now, because you were talking about the 20 odd negras that were on that ship. on that Portuguese vessel. That gets you a little closer to what Aga Khan really was. Because the Portuguese came here, and I forget the fella's name, but they found an individual that they took back with them to Europe. And they made this big plan on how they were going to have this colony set up. And this also showed you how the colonies were being set up. They took one of us back over there to learn a little bit about the land, about what was there and the people that were there. And they were like, well, look, can we cut out a small piece of land and live there? That was the play in the beginning. We just gonna take a little piece of land. We'll be there for a while. You know, maybe we'll keep it moving and leave later on. So that's what a lot of the tribes thought was going on. But they didn't realize they were in secret making a plan to expand and take over all the land. But when they were talking to this individual they're taking back, they thought that they could get down to the Gulf of Mexico through what we would now call the Intercoastal Waterway here off of Virginia, North Carolina. They thought they could ride that down all the way around Florida and make it there to Mexico, because that's where the larger installation that they had when you talk about Verrazano, you talk about DeSoto, they were further south. So there was a network they were using to get around. And when you look at the voyages they were making, these were already people that were considered to be today African Americans, yet somehow they were here in the 1500s. So how can you make sense of these people coming off a shipwrecked slave ship when there were people that were so-called black folk here over 100 years earlier?
Mm-hmm.
But see, you'll never hear that word Aga Khan when you think about like Norfolk, Virginia, Virginia Beach, Virginia. These names have changed the same way as you look at Arkansas. You look at parts of Louisiana, Arkansas, and so forth. You'll never hear Pequot.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never hear places like that because they renamed everything. That also sounds like a culture a little further south in what we would call Mexico, doesn't it? Pequot. And what's so amazing about places like that, and again, hundreds of years before they say that black folks came, this folks all the way through the 1619 narrative, right? The critical race theory, 1619 project stuff, because you got us there when Hernando de Soto gets embarrassed because he says, I'm the son of the sun. I'm going to tell you that I'm the son of the deity in the sky. I am the son of Anti. I'm the god of all of you Indians, you Indios. Come and speak to me so we can talk about peace. And Pequot, the king of this whole area, Pequot says, well, if you, he sends a letter back saying, if you are the son of the sun, then prove to me that you are the son by drying up the great river. The great river, big river now, Mississippi, the great river. Dry up the great river, then I'll believe you are the son of the sun. Otherwise, I set foot out of my kingdom to see no man. So if you come in peace, we'll be ready for you with open arms. You come for war, come on. We ready for you. And I know DeSoto, who at that point was injured, was livid because he was embarrassed because he couldn't do anything about it. Somebody called him out. That's who it was. And that's why Pequot is so important. One of the reasons why it's so important. But you never hear about that because that was us.
Mm-hmm.
Over 100 years before the so-called Africans got here. That's all ammunition you need.
This discussion that we need to have because when that came about, DeSoto lost a lot of his soldiers. They broke camp. They went into Mexico. Some of them went out what they call going out further west, getting into Texas. They left them. They said because they knew that they could not defeat the American Indians that were over here. And now DeSoto's got one little, well, it's not so little anymore, town in south of Dallas called DeSoto, Texas.
Yep.
The remembrance of how and when he fell. But like you said, these are the discussions that we don't hear. Everything starts with westernized European history, and we don't go into the rest of that and what's taking place. And when these Portuguese and these Spanish were describing the people of this land, and you think that they didn't know what they were talking about, when you had these mixture of people that were Northwest Africans, that were Moroccans, you tell me they didn't know what they were talking about when they were describing the people of this land and what they look like? And they don't look like the people that are the chiefs of these tribes today. Not the ones that I'll say this, the ones that are claiming to be these Oklahoma chiefs. But even these Oklahoma chiefs know the truth. We don't know. And it is the other fellow serpent was saying in the chat is we want to accept being called African American. I said this before, keep saying it. That name or misnomer has no gravity in law. Zero. It removes you from this land. And when they keep saying, okay, we brought a couple Africans here, brought a couple Africans there, no way in the world. Look at the battles between the Portuguese and the American Indians of all of the Caribbean and North, Central, and South America. Look at the battles between the Spanish and the American Indians, North, Central, South America. Then keep looking at the Dutch. Keep looking at all these battles. And my challenge to everyone here that's listening in the chat and maybe listening later, just start doing an informal research on battles, and they'll call them slave revolts, all throughout the Caribbean, all throughout South America, all throughout the Yucatan, all throughout North America. Start putting it together. And if you can, I'm pretty sure you're going to run out of paper, so you're going to have to get some construction paper, just that whole reel, and make a timeline and start putting little marks on there every time you read about all these and all this stuff that was happening simultaneously. So then ask yourself again, when did they have the manpower? When did they have the ships? When did they have the supplies? And when did they have the ammo to capture 30 million Africans to bring them over here to the Americas with all these wars going on? But you do read about the wars that were going on and those that were prisoners of war, as we just talked about today. We're going to deal with that a little bit later on another live. Is all of these wars are going on and prisoners of war and how they are making them move. You off this land, you all in this region, Pequot, you gotta go. Tuscarora, you gotta go. Because there's nowhere in the world that you're going to domesticate a people like the American Indian when you're reading about all the battles. It's impossible. That's why they would take the women and the children. But the men, oh, come on, son. You're not gonna turn around and make me a butler because I'll slice your throat when it's time for dinner. I be just like whooping. It's time to shave, mister. There's nowhere in the world that you're gonna keep me captive and I know the land. Come on, son. Brother Cop, I want you to take us home because I didn't want this to be too long. I just want to, do a couple of hours. We got to come back and revisit this. Sister Gabrielle, right. You still there?
Hey, I got a question.
Go ahead.
Yes, I got a question. All right. Why is it that it's not until the 1500s, 1600s that they talk about trading guns? So before this, I mean, we just read that in the Pequot Wars, they were sophisticated enough to outdo the English with just bows and arrows. Before that, they weren't trading with guns. Guns only came into play and were only used until after this.
It wasn't even about the guns, though, Sister Gabrielle Union. It was the fact that when you read even the link that I sent, and upon further review, they were not used to this type of warfare. They were not used to it. So eventually, when they started making allies with other American Indians, here's where it comes into play. Because when you look at all this that started going on in the 1600s, 1630s, then you lead into King Philip's War. Then you start getting into all these other wars that are going on, French Indian Wars, and all this stuff starts coming into play simultaneously. This was just one continuous war because they had declared war on us, like Brother Copper Indio was saying. They literally had started to declare war with us, and the only way they could actually defeat us was on paper. That is the only way. Because, like I say again, if they were still using, and I am, like I say, give me about 30 minutes after this live stream, I'm gonna find I'm doing some of my archives and pull the video up that I took when they did the reenactment of what happened in the Alamo and how long it took them to reload. It's not happening.
Yeah, I've seen that. Like they had to put the gunpowder in, and they had to put the metal ball in. That takes too long.
Yeah,
somebody running at you, it's just not gonna happen.
It is mission impossible. What they did was, you think about, we started actually getting smaller and smaller when they, quote unquote, open up the floodgates and let all these other Europeans start coming in. As we talked about before, when they let 8 million of those come in through the Ohio Valley. Then you let all those come in through New York Harbor. That's where it started. We started getting smaller and smaller in numbers, because you think, even to this day, they still say, oh, with all the killings, they're killing themselves in Chicago and everywhere else. They still say we're around 12 to 13% of the population. And that was after the great influx of all these other Europeans coming over here. So we were a greater percentage than that.
That's right.
So then too, even as those of us that came from the South, why after the Civil War, why didn't we leave that land? Those along the Mississippi, why didn't those tribes leave the land? Why did they stay on that land? Go back on paper. Just like I said, if I have Wilson Johnson and he puts a stake in the ground, put 4 stakes in the ground, and says, now you live in Johnson County. You never move. You heard Chief Warhorse say, I lived in West Florida. How did I end up in Louisiana? And I never moved. Come on, son. Do not let the spoon taste fool you. Again, Brother Copper, what did you say? What is total warfare? Can you give us that one more time?
All right. Total warfare is the waging of war against an entire civilization on every front: economic, reproductive, social, cultural, religious. Total war. Every aspect of who these people are has to be diminished so that they can become codependent on the invading force. So these people attack them. They attack them in their currency with the wampum, excuse me. They attack them through misogyny laws. They attack them through battle, through open war when they could. They conspired with their cousins, their friends against them, turned tribe against tribe. They attacked them in every way possible. They demonized their spiritual system. They demonized their language, prevented people from being able to speak their language, prevented them from being able to write. Because yes, many of us could write. We had a writing system, and they don't like. And anytime it comes up now, they don't like that. They shut it down. Look what they did to Glenn Beck when he was talking about writings, old ancient writings that came up and artifacts from Ohio. They shut him down for that.
Yes,
we
sir.
were writing. Yeah, we had scribes. We were writing. We were doing all the things they tell you a modern advanced civilization had. We had. They waged war on all of it. Where they could, they would take our buildings and turn them into their buildings. They took our women and children, like Brother James said. The ones that they could take and turn into butlers and laborers and workers. So after about 2 or 3 generations, you had people that didn't know the language, that didn't know the culture, okay, that weren't going to fight because they had always been taught to not fight. Sound an awful lot like, well, the slave narrative, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's total war. That's what ends with chattel slavery. It's total war. It always ends that way.
Sister Gabrielle, you still there?
I'm still.
She up there stirring up that pot of beans over there. I know that's what you doing. Brother, I was saying, Sister Gabrielle Union, I want you to say a little bit, and the next voice you're going to hear after Sister Gabrielle Union will be Brother Copper, and we're going to go ahead and shut it down. I know I had another link, but we got to come back, if y'all don't mind, later on in the week, if we can't do a part 2 to this.
That sounds good.
Sister Gabrielle Union, you over there?
I'm here.
You over there sipping on your herbal tea? If we do a part 2 to this, probably later on in the week, I'll get with y'all and send y'all the rest of the one time and whatever part y'all want to get in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sister Gabrielle Union, can you give us some closing thoughts?
You can't unhear what you hear. You can't unknow what you know. Definitely responsible for it once you know it. Once you hear it, you're responsible for what you do with it and who you teach and how you teach it.
Just Sister Pamela Hall asked a good question. She said, what are we going to do about it? Sister Pamela Hall, it starts with this. Same thing that Brother Copper was saying. When you're dealing with total warfare and the elements of total warfare is first recognizing who you are, share with others on who they are, give them the evidence and sources and let them find out, get to their own. Encourage them to go to powwows like Brother Copper's been doing. And for those that can, start traveling. I urge people all the time. I said, stop going to Cancun. Going to Belize, going to Guatemala. Have these conversations. Use those code words. Talk, because the tour guide, they're gonna tell you what you want to hear because they know you gringo. So they're gonna tell you what you want to hear. But when you use the magic words, you tell them, look, I would like to talk to Chiclera. I like to talk to Chiclero. I want to talk to the elders and the wise ones. The ones that stay up in the mountains. Can we have those conversations? Please take me to them. I want to know the whole truth. If you ever go, like I say, going to Belize, start having that conversation with the wise one, who's the assistant chief, Roy Rodriguez. I'll say his name again, Roy Rodriguez. That they're having these discussions at these places. But we go to the resorts in Cancun and hang out everywhere else. Every now and then, we got to go stay in the village where the roof may leak a little bit so we can talk to those elders and those wise ones. That's what we need to start doing, because there are people that are not in what we call the United States, and they tell you we all the same people. They are all striving for the same thing, and they are waiting on us to wake up. You go all throughout the Caribbean, you go all throughout Mesoamerica, you go out South America. They are literally waiting on the American Indians of the mainland to wake up. And once we do, that's when we're gonna see the shift. And it's not gonna take 3, 4, 5 generations. You'll be able to see it within your lifetime, but they're waiting on us. But we're too busy trying to paint this narrative, as Brother Copper Indio said. I'm letting him get the last word of this 1619 experiment. And oh no, and people talking about critical race theory. What people don't understand with critical race theory, I said this before and I'll say it again. They say it's not being taught in school, but it is being taught in school. But in a sense of every time they mention somebody black, they consider black, they say, I said this before, such and such former slave, such and such was a former slave, such and such was a slave. This person was a slave. They came over from Africa. They've already equated African to slave, African to slave. And I say again, there were some Africans that were coming over here, but they were free Africans. The Melungeons tell you this. All these other people, you heard Brother Copper, and we talk about the Spanish and the Portuguese. Let's even get to the Portuguese, because we have to go talk about the Portuguese before we can even talk about the Spanish that were coming over here, describing to people what they look like. That you gonna tell me that they don't know Africans? They wasn't calling them Africans. They wasn't calling them those people that were over. They knew. Now the deal is, we've got to know. So we're going to continue to go to the port of no return, giving them our money. They'll take your money. But they understand we're not brothers and sisters. And I know some people don't like that. They hate it. And they keep talking about you the Igbo people, you this and you that. Again, the same Igbo people that are practicing voodoo. Someone show me Papa Legba. And what is he smoking? Come on, son. I yield the mic. Brother Copper, take us home.
Yes, sir. I want to piggyback on what Brother James just said, because there's some things that we got to understand, and there's some things I want everybody that's listening to this now and that listens to this later on to take away. We got to apply. We don't get out of this mess until we start applying things like the Pequot War to what's going on today. And I've already, we've already discussed total war and what that means in terms of dealing with your enemy. You look around, you read news articles, you read Facebook and so forth, you see total war still being waged against us. Our culture is being vilified by both political parties in this country. Our language, we've been taught it's Ebonics. It's a dumbed down form of English, when our languages are part of what makes English what it is. And people, and I can safely say people around the world know that. Just ask people who speak Indian English. Now, I say that to say that when you got people waging total war against you, everything about you is bad. Your dances, your gold chains, your culture, your music, everything about you is bad. unless somebody else is doing it. Then it's all right. That's total war. These other people can go and wear your women's hairstyles, but that's total war. When everybody else can come and copy you, come into your neighborhood, sell you garbage, and then leave with your money, that's total war. When they got you killing yourselves by the dozens in a weekend now in certain parts of the country, and that don't get covered, but somebody going into a school or, or some other event, a club, nightclub or something like that, and taking out 2 or 3 people, that's big news, but it ain't no big deal that, over a dozen of our people got taken out in a weekend by our own people now. They just assume that's par for the course. That's okay. Same people that are teaching you critical race theory, like Brother James said, has always been taught, just not quite in the same way. That's total war. And not just on us, I'm talking about this entire country. Because that critical stuff is part of what they were doing in Russia in the turn of the 20th century. They don't want you to know that. Because the same people that rewrote, the history of our people 400 years ago, like we've seen in the Pequot War, are trying to rewrite your history right now. So they're not only going to make you Africans, they're going to turn you into something else next time because they can do it, because nobody's going to stop them. You have to be the person that stops them. You, your family, your community we all have to get together and do this. This starts from the bottom up. We don't have anybody that's going to come on CNN and MSNBC and Fox News to save us. And both political parties have people that look like us, claim to be us in some cases, even when they aren't, like the vice president, to represent us. Those people are not coming to save us. Those people are exploiting our name and our image and our likeness to advance their own careers. So we have to be on guard for that. And like the panel has said here a little earlier, do your research. Find your family. You got to take a road trip, whether it's to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Louisiana, Florida, wherever, or even if you got to go out the country and go to places like Belize and Guatemala, Colombia, maybe. Who knows? If you got to go connect with your people. Even if they don't necessarily call you cousins or you call them cousins, connect with your people. And you're going to start finding you got people in places you never thought ever. And once you understand that, you understand what Brother James was saying about us being the same people and how everybody outside of this place is looking at us saying, hey, when y'all wake up, we ready to form Voltron. So go back, look at your history, get with your people, talk to them. And you'll be surprised. A lot of these people that you find in your family tree that you end up going to talk to, there's parts of our families that just swore they won't never gonna talk to each other about 30, 40 years ago. And you reconnecting back with them is gonna do more to restore your family and to restore our people as a whole than depending on any of these politicians to come and save us. So I just want to stress that fact and give you guys words of encouragement to say that it's coming. This thing that we've been talking about, that we've been learning about in history books about how we're supposed to overcome, I'm using air quotes. It's possible. And like Brother James said, this ain't going to take 5 generations. This can happen in our lifetime. We just need to wake up. We need to wake as many people up as we can. We don't all have to have the same religion. We don't all have to have the same ideology. We don't all have to see eye to eye on relationships and this and that. The stuff that people are arguing about on YouTube, we don't have to deal with that. As long as we wake up, know who we are, and know that all of our people are here in the Americas. We can coordinate and we can do it offline. And that's the other problem that we have is that we do everything on the internet. And I'm not just talking about YouTube. I'm talking about like just social media in general. We tell everybody what we're doing, but notice how all of the things that I'm using air quotes again, white supremacy is supposed to be saying against us or doing against us is all done in secret. How's that? They can move in secret and we out in the open arguing about silly stuff. So when we put that down and we reconnect with our people, that's the first step in us taking our land back and us taking our economies back and us taking our civilization back. So I appreciate the chance to talk, brother James. Miss Gab, it's good to get on live with you again and actually talk about some of this stuff because I've been thinking about it, I've been researching, but it's good to be back in here to discuss it. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Dudu. Brother James. Appreciate
I've been
it.
missing y'all. I was having a thing on this end. I had to kick some sucking seat in the face. And then, but I want to give everyone an opportunity again to tune in. I appreciate Brother Copper coming in. I appreciate the reader, Sister Gabrielle Union. And for everyone else out there, I got love for all of y'all, except for one person. He know who he is. But to Brother Carrot and Brother No Sellout, we're going to do it all again. And like I said, in the words of Russell Simmons, thank y'all for coming out. God bless you. Good night.
That would be nice.
Peace.